Hi guys, it's Rory here. Just wanted to leave a quick note to say that if you enjoyed last week's episode and want to keep up to date with the content that we release every week, please remember to follow or subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whichever platform you're listening to us on. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify specifically, please also remember to leave us a review. It means a lot to us and does wonders for pushing our podcast in front of new listeners every week. Once you've done that, leave a comment on Spotify or come and join us on X, BlueSky, or Instagram and let us know that you've left a review. It means a whole lot to us and we'll make sure that we get in touch with you to say thank you. Thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and today I've got the pleasure of being joined by Sandeep Menon. Sandeep, how are you? Thank you very much for joining me on the show. It's a pleasure to finally have you on here.
Thanks a lot, Rory. I'm good. Like we were talking earlier, just a little bit, hectic with all the deadlines and stuff, but doing well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I was saying to Sandeep off air, I'm just back from 3 days away in Dublin over the weekend, on top of a very busy work schedule, on top of being very busy in other parts as well, and I'm just absolutely burst. And then of course Sandeep mentioned that he has deadlines for 2 books coming up, deadlines for a book coming up on top of his work commitments and a million and one other things, so it's been a pretty busy time for you as well by the sounds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just a lot of work to make sure that all my citations of the book is correct, and rechecking all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Busy time, man. Busy time. Sandeep that's obviously going to give it away to our listeners, but Sandeep is an author, amongst many other things, but he is importantly an expert on Indian football and an Indian football historian. And today we're going to be talking about one of the stories from football in India. It's one that I'm particularly excited about. As I mentioned to Sandeep off air, and as many of our long-time listeners will know, we have not touched on football in India whatsoever, either on the podcast, either on our social media, on our website, whatever. It's not something that has really presented itself as an opportunity for a story to be told, but it's also not something that we have actively went and looked to tell. And I think we're going to be talking about some of the perceptions surrounding that today and why that's the case. But Sandeep reached out to me after one of our call-outs on social media, and I was really keen for us to be able to tell this story. It's the story of Bengaluru FC and their 10-year odyssey within football in India, but also the historic nature of the club and the historic nature of football within India that a lot of people, particularly in Scotland and England and elsewhere in Europe, might not actually realise. I've got the best possible person with me to tell this story today, and I'm excited to learn quite a lot, and I hope you, our listeners, are excited to hear quite a lot about this too. Before we kick things off properly, Sandeep, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your history with football, I suppose?
Okay, so I'm from the southernmost state in India called Kerala. And for us, football is the number one sport. I know, obviously, everybody knows that India is a cricket country. And cricket is, number one, number two, number three sport. And then comes any other sport, except in certain pockets. And Kerala is one of those pockets. So I grew up watching football, playing football in the backyards. I was never really good enough to, go professional or even semi-professional. So I played a little bit in college, that too with great difficulty, and then stopped. And I'm an engineer by education, but it was not something that I wanted to pursue. So my only real passion was football, and I quite like to read and write and things like that. So I just sort of merged those two and started my career as a journalist. And here we are after 13 years or 14 years now. Over the years, it's evolved as well. I went from being a full-time journalist. 2 years ago, I decided to move a little bit away, try to do projects that are long-term and look at history and culture and society and so on and so forth. So, here we are. So the first book is part of that, and another one is coming, which is a lot more into culture and history of football.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can't wait for those. I mean, that really ticks all of our boxes, as you mentioned there. You like to look into the history, culture, sociology, and political context of things. And as I've said numerous times on this podcast, doing that through the lens of football is one of the best and often one of the easiest ways that you can do it. You can learn so much through studying football in a nation. You can learn so much about that nation's history and culture and loads of other things that have happened. It's an amazing gateway into social and historic research. But you mentioned your first book there. I think that's probably a good place for us to start in terms of our context. So tell us about your first book, and more importantly, tell us about your relationship with Bengaluru FC.
So the first book is about a club called Bengaluru FC. They started in 2013, which, to be fair, doesn't look really old. So the book encompasses the first 10 years of their journey. And that 10 years has been extremely successful and for an Indian football context, tremendously transformative in terms of what the club did to change the landscape, how football is run, our club should be run, how players should be taken care of, and generally speaking, it was one of those teams that really stood out in the last 10 years and made a tremendous difference in Indian football's culture and the general environment, the professionalism of it all, let's say.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I started my career on the same time as the club. So I was there from day one when the club was launched, and I followed their history throughout as my career grew as well. So it was fantastic to follow them. They won the league in the first year. They won multiple cups. They were the first Indian team to play the AFC Cup final, which is like the Europa League equivalent, in Europe. So they were the first Indian team to get there. There had been a couple who reached the semi-finals before, but Bengaluru FC was the first to play the final. They lost the final 1-0, but it was a good performance, and I was there in the stadium as well. And it was one of the most heartbreaking moments I've had because you want to go like a journalist, right? I'm going to call it down the middle, but that doesn't work. And you followed them, you know the players, you know the work that they have done. And although they were playing against a much harder team from West Asia, Al Jawi, I think is how they pronounced, Air Force Club from Iraq. They were obviously the clear favorites, but you always hope, and football is all about hope. And when that was dashed by a 1-0 loss, it was a little painful. So it's been a tremendous journey following them all through. There's some great characters as well in the club.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's amazing. It's a great story. It's like you said, though, as being a journalist, you're going to a football match, you're not really able to stay biased. If you support one of the clubs, you have that attachment to them and they're always going to be your club. You're always going to want to see them win. But it's quite fascinating how a club that have only been around for 13 years now have become so successful as well. I mean, it's an incredible story. And of course, you spoke about this story in your book. But what I loved most about the book is that it wasn't just a play-by-play of each season and each match and each result that we see so often with these types of works. It's actually a massive insight and a conversation around what Bengaluru FC have done for the culture of football in India, the historical sort of anchor points and context attached to the club, the heritage of the club, the football that came before them in the area and in the region, but also what the future holds for Bengaluru FC because of this impact that they've had. So it's a really, really great insight and actually a really important contribution to football literature because you don't often get those types of insights where it's like, okay, yes, this is what the club has done in 10 years, but this is the wider impact of the football club as well. I think it's just an incredible way to speak about your football club, I think, when you start looking at it from that perspective as well. But it's also good for people to see those as reference points and see people speaking about them. We'll put links to your book in our show notes for this episode so people can go and check it out. But you mentioned there that, your career started at the same time as Bengaluru FC. So before they came around, did you have another football club that you supported, or did you not necessarily feel that another club represented you? Was another club in the city or in the region that you followed? Or was this just another club that came up and you immediately fell in love with?
Bangalore, I wouldn't call myself like a pure supporter of Bengaluru FC because I was covering them. So there's always that attachment to the club comes from the fact that you know the people involved.
Sure.
So you know how hard they worked and you want them to be successful. And it's part of the city that I'm working in, which I've called my home for the last 13, 14 years now. So that way I want them to do well. But originally, I really didn't have a club that I supported because Indian football is very strange in that because the country is so massive, the top division only has, a certain amount of clubs that can be fit in. And when I grew up, there was no club from my neighborhood who I could go to the stadium and watch and things. So I actually grew up watching this sort of format, the sevens football, we call it. It's a seven-a-side football played on mud grounds.
Okay.
It's a locality thing. So that's what I watched growing up because that was what was available as live action for me. So while I am from Kerala state, which is different from where Bengaluru is in Karnataka, another state in South India, I never really had a team that I supported, but I loosely followed a team called Dempo from Goa, who were very, very strong in the mid to late 2000s. Around 2008, I think they reached the AFC Cup semi-final, one of those. Fantastic team with a lot of local players in their ranks, really well coached by, a local coach as well. So that was one of those teams that I really quite like watching in those days.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, again, it's a good insight into the club, and because you know the people and you're involved within the city's journalism scene, and you kind of know the club inside and out, it obviously makes it so much easier to be able to cover them and chart their history. So it's a perfect insight, and that's where we're going to start right at the very beginning of the formation of this club. And I suppose by talking about the formation of Bengaluru FC, it will probably allow us to speak a little bit about the context of football in India at this time, and also the formation of the Indian Super League, which I would probably say anyway is what put football in India on most people's radars. People from England and Scotland and the rest of Europe, for better or worse. But the formation of Bengaluru FC in 2013, there's a lot of context and there's quite a lot that we can actually take from looking at that founding, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the troubles that Indian football has had over the years, so basically, if you go back in history, Indian football was always a national tournament style football. So you would have your leagues in each state, which was like the most important thing. So you'll have a league in Calcutta, you'll have a league in Bangalore, you'll have a league in Kerala, Goa, so on and so forth. And then there would be tournaments all over the country. So you have 2 tournaments in the winter in Delhi. There's one tournament in Guwahati. There's one in Sikkim. There's one, so 8 or 9 in Kerala. So what would happen is these good teams or the big teams who are doing well in the local leagues would be invited and they'll face each other. And then we had a Santosh Trophy, which was a tournament which pitted all the states against each other. So that was like our, let's say, the equivalent of an FA Cup. So all the states and the players from each state will represent and then they'll play against each other. So in this context, that was how football lived for the longest time. And then I think in the mid-90s, it was changed. Bob Houghton, who was an English coach, was the national team coach at the time. And a decision was made to have a national league called National Football League. It was renamed into the I-League later, and then I-League was replaced by Indian Super League as the top division. So in the last 1995 to now, in the last 30 years, we've had 3 different versions of the top division league. And currently, the Indian Super League is under a lot of problems. The league has been delayed. There's problems between the association and the league, the company that conducts the league or hosts the league. They're saying it won't happen and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of uncertainty about the future as well. It could be that the ISL continues, or it could be that there might be a new league or whatever might come out of it. We don't know at the moment. But everything I hear says that it's probably ISL and that is going to continue. So you can understand the ecosystem in India. It's not very conducive for this to be sustainable for a long term, or at least we haven't found the right formula to keep it sustainable. In the same context, we have had multiple clubs that have opened and shut since these days. There were like great teams who, winners and who won the league and who spent a lot of money and so on and so forth. And a lot of them did shut down. So there's always this craving for a new team to come in. So in this context is when the corporate entry, as we call it, where you can directly enter into the top division as opposed to coming up through the ranks down the lower leagues. So Bengaluru FC was one of the teams that came in as a corporate entry in 2013. And when they came in, the league was, I think, 15, 16 teams. It's fairly longish league. And they came in that because you come in off the blue, you have to then make do with the players that you don't really, the top players are not available for you, because they're already signed to the big teams or pre-existing contracts, etc. So they had to make do with signing all the players that the other clubs didn't want. Unlike contracts now, back in the day, the contracts were like 1 year or 2 years at best. So they didn't want to spend too much money. They didn't know what to do. So some of the people behind the scenes who started the club, one of them being Pradyum Reddy, who was a coach in India. He has a great knowledge of the local football culture and scene and players. They also had who later became CEO. At that time, he was not. His name was Mandar Tamani, who also had great understanding about the ecosystem. So he knew what was lacking from an administrative standpoint. And they had another CEO called Mustafa Gauss, who was a former tennis player who really knew what an athlete needs to perform at the optimum level, and a very willing owner and very supportive owner in the JSW, which is Jindal family. So all these came together. They got a bunch of players who, some of them, like Rino Anto, who was a right back, was on the verge of retirement because his knee injuries were, creeping up and he could no longer play at the level he wanted to. They signed a few players who nobody knew much about. The only marquee name that they signed was Sunil Chetri, who was the national team captain, who continues to play, is one of our greatest players of all time. He was 28. He had just returned the previous year back to India after stints in Sporting Club in Portugal and a stint in the US and stuff. So he was the only name value player they had, and the rest of them all were like an island of misfit toys, to put it very bluntly. And under Ashley Westwood, who was a former Manchester United academy graduate, I think he was class of 93 or he was class of 91. So just around the time when their whole class of 92 was coming, I think he told me he was ahead of Wes Brown at the pecking order, but he chose to leave and join another club, and his career went a whole other way. So he came here just after having been released following his time with the Michael Appleton in Blackburn. And Ashley came with this idea of how to run a football club, because in India, football clubs are not really run professionally. You just come, train, and then go home. You eat whatever you want. If you want to do gym, you do the gym. It was like one of those very loose things. And he came in and he was like, no, this club has to run like a proper enterprise. So the players come together, eat together, look after your food. You train in the proper manner. He realized that a lot of his players are cramping up a lot because Indian weather is not, the cold and stuff, right? So they cramped up a lot, and then he was like, okay, we have to get the fitness up. So he did a lot of things to ensure everything around football was perfect. So this team, which had this bunch of players who are not at the, who we would call superstars or even anywhere near the national team for the large, other than Chetri and Robin Singh, who was another player. They were nowhere close to the top level. But under him, I think at one point they had 7 or 8 players in the national team. The club went on to win the league in the first year, and it was a tremendous success. And Ashley and the core team at that time deserves a lot of credit for what they did. Once BFC was successful, everybody was like, okay, we have to follow what they're following because their budget is not very high. They're doing it in a different way. Oh, they are housing all their players in the same apartment so that they can do recovery training in the swimming pool the next day after the game. Oh, let's do the same. These small things which might not sound very important to, somebody in Europe where football is, very strong and the ecosystem is well developed. In India, these were all like game changers. And like Ashley was also like an absolute, I guess tyrant is the wrong word, but he was so demanding that he needed you to fly at the right time so that you don't miss meals and you train at the right time. And there was no compromise with him. And you needed somebody with that kind of knowledge and desire and that steadfastness. Because India is one of those places where there is a tendency to adjust. So we just say, I just adjust with it. So once you bend a little, then they'll break you. So Ashley made sure that he didn't bend for the longest time, and he ensured the club reached great heights. And then eventually the culture takes over, right? You have to bend at some point and then finally breaks, and obviously the relationship was no longer tenable, so Ashley had to leave. But he had left with a tremendous impact in the ecosystem in India.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to hear just how much the club actually adopted these modern systems, these different ways of doing things. And this is the thing, this is where all great football stories come from. All it takes is 1 or 2 people to have that kind of insight, have that vision to really do something different, but something that they back as working, to actually go and make a huge impact on football. And that's been the case with Bengaluru and India. So in terms of the club actually founding, obviously, you've mentioned there that there was a kind of idea to have a sort of franchise. Was there a club in Bengaluru beforehand, before Bengaluru FC came around, or has this been the first iteration of a club competing at this level within the city?
Oh, no. We've had really, really famous and successful teams before. From a National League standpoint, there was HAL, which was a public company, a factory. They had a team called HAL, and there was another called ITI, which is a telecoms team. So you had them who played the National League, but through history, you've had some really, Bangalore Muslims was a huge team, Bangalore Crescents, Bangalore Mars. So they've had this huge history of great clubs for a very long time. But around the late 2000s, the Bangalore football culture was dwindling. and the clubs had sort of shut down and decided to not continue. And a lot of these old great clubs have gone down to the C division and all that. So they were no longer at the flourishing level football ecosystem in Bangalore. And that's when Bengaluru FC came. And their success has since sort of restarted the whole environment again. So now we have multiple clubs who are playing in the second division or trying to get into the second division and then onto the top ISL. There are a lot of football activities that go on. The local state league has improved massively. I think there are some 20 teams in the local first division, or we call it super division in the state. Women's football now have the only state with two divisions for women's football is Karnataka. So their impact has been tremendous. There's a lot of small clubs that has come up that is trying to, academies and coaching and a lot of activities in the youth department and things. So while I would not attribute all of this purely to Bengaluru FC, but their success showed that there is something to be looking out for, that you can do, and that the football sort of reignited here again. And Bangalore as a city is a very conducive city to play football as well, because the weather is quite good. It's a little bit of an altitude, so it's not too hot most of the year. So in many ways, that also has helped.
Yeah, it can be a big factor in a lot of people coming. Obviously, being from Scotland and being involved in Scottish football, there's a lot of players who've said they've struggled with the weather or just outright don't want to come here because of the weather. So believe it or not, it can be a huge factor in actually influencing players' decision to go to football clubs. But, you said there, you mentioned about their league win, which is incredibly historic and showed the success of this model that they'd created. But, the clubs, after that, the clubs went from strength to strength, and they've really actually kind of consolidated themselves as a serious force within football in India. And as we were talking about earlier, they also made the semi-final of the
AFC Cup.
Yes, the AFC Cup, the Asian equivalent of the Europa League, which is absolutely incredible for a club that's, in comparison to a lot of other teams, not been around for very long.
Yeah. So I think it was just into their fourth year, end of the third year, because the seasons in Asia is a little different. Most of the time, these AFC tournament knockouts happen after the seasons ended in India. It's only later on they all tried to fix the schedule. Before that, it was like odd times. But nevertheless, for a 4-year-old club to go in and do that was tremendous. And that's something that the owners and the people making decisions were always very keen on. They wanted to ensure to showcase that Indian football does very well in Asia. Then they have the strength to do it. And at that time, Indian clubs did not have a direct entry to the AFC Champions League. We had to do, I think, 2 or 3 qualifiers to get there, but by then you would run into some really top team and not get through. But AFC Cup was an option. BFC did really well. I think they reached the semi-final again even when the structure was changed. And it was like a great experience for all of us, because suddenly we saw Carlos Queiroz come in here, and we saw some really top players. Jermaine Pennant came and played in India while he was playing in Singapore. So it was like tremendous to see these big teams. Johor Darul Tashim was this big team from that BFC beat in the semi-final, who were the defending champions. The previous year they had won the league, won the AFC Cup, that is, or in the final or something, like really dominant teams. And for us as fans, it was great to see teams from Tajikistan and all these places come and play here. We even saw a team from North Korea.
Wow.
And PFC went and played in North Korea as well. 1 or 2 journalists were able to go to North Korea and cover the game, but we saw the North Korean team come and play in India, and it's just very surprising, right? You don't really expect that to happen. So as an experience, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. It just speaks to, a lot of people that I know, they say that they feel that the Europa League and the Europa Conference League are what the Champions League should be. And I don't know if the perceptions may be the same within the Asian Confederation about the AFC Cup, but it's amazing getting to see teams and supporters and club cultures from countries that you never normally would. It's just an amazing all-round experience, being able to follow your team in that way and engage in these cultural exchanges at the end of the day is what they are. But, being able to see a team from North Korea and even getting journalistic access to it isn't something that, it's something that a handful of people have actually ever been given. So it's just absolutely incredible being able to do that. And of course, the success of the club over the last while hasn't just been down to this infrastructure they've built or what they're doing on the field, but it's also been down to the club culture that they've built in the stands and amongst the supporters and the empowerment that they've actually given them to follow and back the team. It's been a massive part of what's made Bengaluru FC so successful over the last decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting because we've had so many new clubs try to start a new culture, try to resonate with the fans in the state. So historically, we have had great fan culture in Calcutta, where you have Mohan Bagan, who was over 100 years old, East Bengal was over 100 years old, Mohammedan Sporting also over 100 years old. All of them tremendously rooted in the local culture, local ethnic rivalries, local, that history is really deep. And, Mohan Bagan beat the regimental team in 1911, which was seen as this huge victory against Podolanism back in the day. So they've had this established fan culture, and several times many clubs have tried and failed in many different places. That is something for Bengaluru FC also. They tried to make sure that they were relevant to the city. And there's something that they've continued to do. Like during COVID, for example, a lot of these small businesses were struggling. So they made sure that they used their social media, went and shot videos and made it like a big part of their season campaign to try and get these places back on their feet. Because they were struggling financially. So the call to action was help them out, and their fans did. A lot of them survived. A couple of them didn't, but that's just the name of the game. Another thing they did was they managed to hit two sides of the city. So Bangalore being, it's an IT hub. So there is a large amount of people who have come to the city from other parts of the country, like myself included. They were able to get the young urban crowd into the stadium right in the beginning, which is not something that usually happened. There was like a historical fan group that was always following these teams right through history. They were able to get them. And with that comes, visibility, spending power, social media, all that kind of thing that comes along with it. So they were able to capitalize on that. They were able to get these young men and women who grew up watching Premier League and La Liga and stuff on TV a chance to replicate what they saw on the stands here in Bangalore. So they came up with songs and chants and, which is very reminiscent of a westernized crowd. So they were able to do that. And obviously they also reached out to the more traditional football hubs in the city. And they were able to get the fans from that as well. So they struck a chord in that way all across the city. What is also interesting for me, at least for me, is how West Block Blues is the biggest fan group. That's the name of the biggest fan base for Bengaluru FC. So they are the biggest fan group, right? And both the fan base and the club has a very liberal outlook, a very left-leaning outlook. So they stand for LGBTQI plus their rights. They stand for making public places safe for women. So last season, I think it was free for women to go into the West Block Blue stands. Women could walk in. There was no need to buy a ticket. And women have always been part of that stand.
Phenomenal.
And they have always been comfortable. There has not been any problem. They are very helpful and, they try to bring them on. It's the same with the gender ideologies. They stand for Pride Month and they put out content, helping them and supporting them. It's not something that you often see on fan stands. It's general that you see more right-leaning conservative side generally. In India, it's not as easy black and white because of many different factors and how our culture is different.
Yes.
But this was very interesting for me because I observed this from, sitting across the stand all my career. That this part was very good. So I've sent my wife, my friends have gone, so many of them have gone to the stands and had a great time. And Bangalore city as a city itself had very strong women right from history. They loved their music, they loved their beer. There was that modernity which came as part of the cantonment area in Bangalore and so on and so forth. So it's very reminiscent. It's like a very, cosmopolitan place. And this club sort of embodies that cosmopolitan side. There is changes in it now because as the club is older and more fans are coming in, there are more traditional side of fan groups and things. There is like the language becomes a new way of supporting the club in the local language and so on and so forth. So the club is also trying to do the same. And it's being reciprocated in the stands. It's been a very nice symbol for the city. It's been a very successful symbol for the city. This is a city which is very welcoming. This is a city that is comfortable for, weather-wise, and people are really good. So in that way, it's been a very welcoming sort of an environment. And this club has really found its place here.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I really love this sort of, I don't know if cleverness is the right word, but like you said earlier, the club really struck a chord And it has actually been quite smart in how they've managed to get different people into the stands. Like you say, they kind of crossed both sides of the city, or all sides of the city, which, for a city the size of Bangalore, you would often associate it with having, maybe 2 or 3 or more football clubs. But they've really managed to turn them into a symbol of the city, as you've mentioned, and be that one club that actually represents people. They've really tapped into the culture of the city, and people can express that on the stands. But like I sort of alluded to when I first asked you that question, I think this really speaks to how important it is that you can actually build that club culture from the start and make people buy into what it is you're doing as a football club and buy into what your vision for the team is, because it's not just a case of existing as a football club and expecting people to come and support you. And it's not even a case of saying, you're going to do one thing or we claim to stand for you, but then you do things that are in opposition to the support or the views of your fans, because, football supporters are clever. They see through those kind of things very quickly, and they can very quickly retract their support and turn against you if it's necessary. But the club have actually put their money where their mouth is. They've supported the community. They've done things within the community that's built that culture around them. And yeah, they've just created this magnificent supporter culture and club culture where people can actually be proud to support the team. And like you said, feel comfortable on the stands, no matter what race, no matter what gender you are, no matter what your view is. I just think it's magnificent how they've went about doing this. It's really, really incredible, and not something that you see very often these days within football.
Yeah, I think a lot of credit for that has to go to the early leadership team and Ashley Westwood himself, because the leadership team was very open to trying new things, and that's how they were able to connect all across. When Ashley himself, the first league game started, would go out carrying, these pamphlets and giving it to different places, giving it to auto rickshaw guys, giving it to the local market people, asking a barter system, like, I'll buy a bread from your store and can I hang this in your store as a barter? Will you give me that? So he did a lot of groundwork. He went around in the auto announcing that please come to the stadium and so on and so forth. The idea for Ashley was very clear that if I get people into the stadium, that's the task. If they come once, he's like, I'm sure they'll come again, because I know that we can entertain them. And one of the things that has been a hallmark for this club, except for a couple of years when it was really like a bad year for them, this is a club that is built on hard work and a belief, and that never say die attitude. And that comes from, Ashley was the guy who created it. Until the final minute goes, there is no loser. So you might be 1-0 down, 2-0 down, whatever it is, they're going to try and come back. You're 2-0 at halftime, no problem. Everybody in the stands believes that they can come back. It may not always happen, but it has happened enough times that everybody stays on and they'll be like, no, the game's not over. That can happen. And then all it needs is that one goal, right? That can go off anybody's backside, or that scruffy goal. And suddenly everything changes. So people are always supporting. Like this, I've never heard PFC fans booing their team. That's not happened, even if when they're playing badly. So they're always supporting. And the moment the momentum shifts, they recognize that momentum shift and the crowd goes absolutely ballistic. And over the years, they've also managed to create rivalries organically. Like the Mohun Bagan, which is one of the storied clubs in Indian football, is probably their biggest rivals, because they both kept fighting and playing each other for, the trophy. So they've lost twice now to them in the final in the last 3 years or so. They lost the league in the second year of their existence. In the final last 5 minutes, Mohun Bagan scored an equalizer to win the league title. If BFC were like anything else, BFC would have, won the league. So they've had this storied rivalry, and BFC have beaten them in multiple cup tournaments. So that rivalry exists, and there is a rivalry with Kerala Blasters. There is a rivalry with Chennai FC. So they have organic rivalries that sometimes were fan created, sometimes were created because of competition, sometimes it's a matter of geography. So they have all these, or sometimes even political relationship, etc. So they've managed to become very relevant in Indian football landscape and create a story and a narrative around themselves, which attracts fans and keeps them in the stands and keeps them coming back again and again.
I quite like that idea. They've created a narrative around themselves and for themselves as well. Those are the types of things that can lead to some really interesting clubs and supporter cultures through the world. I mean, FC Porto, Aberdeen, Bursaspor in Turkey. there's a lot of clubs that we can point to who create that narrative around themselves, that when you go to that place, you know what their club is. And, that's one of the big things that I love about heritage, is this attachment to place within football, this idea that the place that you're from, the things from your place are expressed in the stands through your football club, because the club is as much a part of your city, or should be at least, as the people, as the businesses, and all those kind of things. So I love this idea that they created this narrative around themselves,
Yeah, and this is also another interesting fact, which is because, as I said, Bangalore is a city that has a lot of people from all over. This club, in some ways, become a place where you have something that all of you like in the same manner, right? Like you have a symbol that you can come under, one banner under which you all come. So I'm from Kerala, I'm from Chennai, I'm from Bangalore, I'm from Bombay, Delhi, Shillong, Calcutta. But if I'm here and I want to go see a match, I can go and everybody's welcoming. It's a good time. It's a safe environment 99% of the time. You can go there and have fun. So after that, the stadium is right at the heart of the city. So the matches are between mostly around 7:30. You finish your game at 9:30. Just walk down the road. There are multitudes of great hotels and restaurants and bars and pubs. Go have a good time and then, enjoy with your friends and then go home. It's like a perfect place for all these things to happen, for a young crowd to go, have a bit of entertainment, have a bit of a drink or something, have a good peaceful meal with your friends. So everything sort of comes together, and they managed to do that really, really well. In fact, during the AFC Cup semi-final second leg, so the first leg had finished 1-1. And the second leg was at home, and it was like a massive game. So they reached out, they sent out a story, so a Facebook post or whatever, saying, we are representing India in Asia. Let's forget about the cup rivalries. We want everybody to please come and support us, because we're trying to do something for the first time.
Wow, yeah.
And a lot of the clubs responded saying all the best and congratulations. A lot of supporters came. But they didn't come wearing the blue of Bengaluru. They came wearing their team colors. So there were people who wore a Shillong Lajong dress or, other different, like in the final, Kerala Blasters fans came in wearing yellow. So they just came and supported a team. So that way they've managed to make themselves very quintessential for Indian football as well.
That's really fascinating for me for a lot of reasons, both from a kind of academic and my studies perspective. But, obviously, being a Celtic fan, that would never happen in Scotland. It probably wouldn't even happen in England. It doesn't happen in England. So that's something that's incredibly unique, but it's something that's really cool as well, because it's not often. In fact, you never really see that happening. And obviously, you'll get fans of some teams, if it's a club that maybe doesn't make it to a certain stage of continental competition very often, they'll often say, good luck and whatever, we're all behind you because you're representing, I don't know, Serbia, for example, or you're representing a team that's maybe lower down the leagues in Italy or something like that. But it's very actually rare you would then get supporters turning up to see that game and watch it happen in their own club colours. So that's absolutely magnificent. And going back to what you said a minute ago about rivalries as well, I did want to ask how the Bengaluru FC supporters perceived within other supporters groups within India. Where's their role within the Indian fan scene? Because obviously if they're doing something different, as happens when anyone is doing something different, that's when rivalries and tensions tend to come to the fore, particularly, as you mentioned, within a supporter scene where a lot of supporters' cultures and a lot of club cultures are based around, ethnic divides and different sort of political viewpoints and religious viewpoints as well. I'm quite keen to see where the Bengaluru FC supporters fit into that fan scene and how they get on with their other fellow supporters.
So it's a very interesting one there also. Bangalore FC fans, West Block Blues particularly, are seen as somewhat of a front runner. It is not to say they were the first one to do the tifos or the first one to have songs and chants. That's not the case, but they were the ones who were able to do it at a very large scale and at a very consistent level. And also, obviously, the television and all that were there to capture what they were doing as well. So it became something that other clubs, especially the ISL clubs, like the legacy clubs, obviously had their own thing. But the newer clubs were able to sort of, their fan base also wanted to do it. So in some sense, the early part, so when Bengaluru FC was playing in the I-League and the ISL clubs were in a different, league altogether, there was a lot of overlap between the fans themselves who would get in both games and both teams. Both sets of fans helped each other also. If they were coming here, a lot of them would stay in the houses of the fans here. They would know each other. They would help each other with tifos and get permissions and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very cordial relationship for a while, and then as Bangalore also came into the ISL, at least this I'm talking about the newer clubs and their fan bases, it has changed since, because the Kerala Blasters and the Bengaluru FC fans have a great rivalry. It becomes a little too much, in my opinion, online, with the name calling and the abuse sometimes goes a little far. But then there's a needle in that rivalry that is very fan driven, because on the field, Kerala Blasters has never been really as successful as BFC and or successful against BFC for that matter either. The other team, Chennai, is from the neighboring state. It's like a 5-hour train ride away. So you do have a lot of traveling fans, plus a lot of people who are already here. That rivalry is also quite strong, but it's not like a very, there's no bad blood or anything. The Mumbai FC rivalry, the club doesn't exist at the top two divisions anymore. They've really fallen on hard times and sort of sunk away. They were one of the OG rivals, as they say. Though fans there were really sarcastic and, they had a lot of banter with each other. But they were extremely friendly. So the traveling fans would, go have a beer with them and spend some time with them. A lot of them, are good friends outside the field, and a lot of this argument is just restricted to the stadiums and online. It's an interesting relationship they have with different clubs. There's a lot of respect against Mohan Bagan. They don't particularly, I don't think the fans are really angry at each other or anything. There's a lot of respect, but on the field, they are extremely, on two opposite ends. So it varies. Around 2015-16, a lot of the Indian national team games used to happen in Bangalore. At that time, it was because, they were trying to host the Under-17 World Cup in 2017, and a lot of the other stadiums are under renovation. So they came here and they found Bangalore to be extremely good from a supporter standpoint. Like you wouldn't get, 25,000, 30,000 people in the stands, whether it's raining or whatever it may be. Huge support. The same West Block Blues would also translate themselves to the larger Indian fan group, which is called the Blue Pilgrims. That's the Indian football fans. So they were part of that as well. So they helped a lot with the tifos and the chants and the songs and creating an atmosphere. And the national team came back in 2022 or 23 for the SAF Cup. It was again like tremendous crowd in the stands, like full stadiums all the way through. And I think they're going to play another game against Hong Kong in October, which is going to be held in Bangalore. So Bangalore has been a very good city for the national team as well, because the fans really, really care for their football.
Nice. That's brilliant. It's great context to know that as well. And in terms of the rivalries, it doesn't sound like anything runs necessarily too deep. Obviously on the field, there's going to be a rivalry. It's going to be a good contest, but the fans largely have a bit of respect for each other. It's always nice to see, you get a lot of people saying that, especially with supporters groups that are at Bangalore, and a lot of fan groups within MLS and the USL in America get this as well, that, there's no place for these left-wing ideologies within football, and they often get laughed at for being ultras. But I mean, I certainly don't agree with that point of view. There's a number of people who don't agree with that point of view. I think more people on football stands who are expressing these views, being inclusive and being progressive is ultimately a good thing. And just because you have different viewpoints doesn't mean you can't be an ultra. Do you know what I mean? So it's nice to see that these things are kind of worldwide and not just confined to other teams as well.
They're not overtly political, though. They may say a few things here and there, tifos here and there, but they are not overtly political. As like a Calcutta club, Mohan Bagan or East Bengal Mohammedan, they put some really strong political statements. Even the Northeast, I think Aizawl and Shillong Lajong and all have done that in the past. So they're not overtly political, because I don't think the fan group as a whole, the individuals are all on the same side, although they might, as a fan base, have a particular leaning. So because of that, I think they have maybe refrained a little bit from saying certain political things. But when there is something that they have to stand for, which is like unanimously agreed that this is not the right thing, or maybe we should say, then they have said it.
Yeah, I suppose you don't need to necessarily be political to be progressive. I suppose, that there's different conversations around that, but I guess that it maybe comes back to the idea that backing the club and backing the views of the club and the unanimous agreement of the supporter base comes before being overtly political.
Yeah, they're very social ideologies and social factors are all very important for them. Like there was a event that happened on New Year's Eve around 2013-14-15, where a few women were groped during the celebration in one of the main streets where they celebrate. And the club took a very harsh or strong stand, calling out, standing against this and wearing a pink jersey in support for women. So in that way, they have made a stance. But I don't know. That does fall under political stance, but I don't know if you understand the difference that I'm trying to make. It's very subtle, but yeah.
Yes, I see what you mean. It's kind of subtle. It's nothing that's obviously kind of going into it as a political stance, and there's that kind of debate. Every decision is political.
Yeah,
Every decision is a political decision for one way or another, but there's ones that are a lot more subtle than others, whereas this one, if you're kind of sliding a scale, is probably more towards the we are standing up for our community and the people within our community that our club represents, as opposed to being overtly political on the other side of the scale. So yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. But again, it's good context to know that this is the club's place within the Indian Super League, despite all the issues that have been surrounding it recently. Kind of like I said to you off air, there's a lot of perceptions within Europe surrounding football in India. A lot of those perceptions, I would say, particularly from the UK, are racist. A lot of people, they see all these kind of older players and coaches going over there and they're saying, if guys who couldn't make it here are going over there, then it can't be very good. But that discredits the entire history of the league and the different talents that have actually come from India at any given point in time. And it's an incredibly reductionist way of looking at football in general. But within the Indian Super League, there has been this tendency for new clubs to form and, like you said, close the doors quite early on because of the different issues. They've not really been able to build that kind of community. And obviously, it's great to see that Bengaluru have done things differently, but there has been a lot of problems with the Indian Super League. But it sounds like things might be a little bit stable again.
So a couple of small corrections there. One would be that Indian Super League teams, maybe one or two, you could argue, have folded, but they sort of restarted in a different place.
Okay.
But a lot of teams have folded. Like I-League had Bharat FC that shut down, or before you had Mahindra and Mahindra, Pune FC, DSK Shivajians. Lost a couple of Goa Cubs decided not to participate anymore. So there have been a lot of these instances as well. It's sustaining an Indian ecosystem is very hard. The Indian Super League is currently a topic of big debate. They have done a lot of good things since they came because they put football front and center, prime time on TV, great telecast, HD, good commentary, all that stuff that a good production should be, which is not the case because earlier football used to be played in the afternoons at 4 o'clock and, where it was not conducive for people to turn up or follow. It was not covered well. Not enough cameras, grainy pictures. It was not done well. So they have done a tremendous thing here in this side. But the Indian ecosystem is now trying to rebalance itself because the clubs went on a spending spree, which has now made it very difficult for it to be sustainable. So they're trying to rebalance it again. I don't know where it lands. And far away from me to begrudge players from making good living. I think they should be paid whatever they're worth, that market is worth. So Indian Super League brought in a lot of international attention also. Like you said, a lot of, Robert Pires and Alessandro Del Piero all came and played in the first year to make a big name for itself. Subsequently, that has died down. Like we don't no longer get these, retired players to come back and play and that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, like you said, the top players will not come here. There is no need for them to come here. We are where we are within the pantheons and the hierarchy of football, all over the world, which is not very high. But in our own world, we have legends and our stories and our people who have done great things, who achieved greatness. It's all relative, right? Like Sunil Chhetri, I think is the second or third highest active goal scorer. It's Ronaldo, Messi and Chhetri. I think they are the three. Now, you could argue that Chetri's goal didn't come against, Portugal or at the World Cup finals. And that's true. But for us, he is the standout player. He's the one who's always delivered. He scored in Asian Cups and won trophies for us in our regional competitions and things. So that way, our history is huge and very meaningful for us. But I can't argue with the idea that the level is not of a country in Europe, which is true. But I don't think that should be a deterrent for anybody to follow. This is how I would sell Indian football, right? If you want to follow football from a country which has, 30 languages, many different cultures, different religion, like the Kerala side is tropical and humid. The Kerala goes and plays a game in Kashmir, in the Jammu and Kashmir side, the northernmost part of India, the state. It's cold. They can go and play against a team in Himachal, which is at the foothills of Himalayas. They can go play a game in the next weekend could be in the northeast, which has hilly regions. So you play over there, and then you come back and play in Goa, which is like a coastal region. So the weather is hugely different. Stories and the language and the culture, the food, everything is different. So as a traveling team, I don't think people understand how difficult it is for a visiting team. So if I have to play a game in Aizawl, which is a club is there, Aizawl, who won the league in 2016 or 17, I think. If I have to play from Bangalore, I have to fly for 3 or 4 hours, get off in Calcutta or Guwahati, take another short-term flight, and then drive another 1 hour. If you're doing the game in Shillong, you have to take one flight and 3-hour bus drive, or drive on the road, or 1 hour, another small flight, and another 1 hour. Door to door, you're traveling for 12, 14 hours, and then those regions are cold. It's at a higher altitude. The food habits are different. The language is different. It creates a tremendous difficult situation for people to play away. For people who love stories and this sort of juxtaposition of culture and football, I think India is one of the best places you can check that out.
I'd agree 100%. I mean, even just based on the stories you've been talking about Bangalore and, traveling to these different places, people actually forget. And I think it's easy for people to get how big India actually is. There's a lot of different cultures, a lot of different regions, a lot of different, it's an incredibly diverse nation across so many different levels. And football is one of those as well. There's some incredible football stories that have come out of India.
And just to give a little context as well, how we play in different parts is also different because it's dependent on our history and our geography. So Bangalore is historically known for the short passing game. Kerala has really pacey players and, good goalkeepers as well. Punjab produces a lot of goalkeepers, but they play a lot of long balls because they're tall, strong people. So and flatlands. So they're able to play that long. They play in long grounds. They don't play in these smaller grounds like they do in some other parts. If you go to Aizawl, they play short passes and they're extremely skillful because they play in hilly areas where the ground is short and they play and they have to have good ball control. And if they shoot hard and then the ball goes outside the ground, they're running behind it for like 2 kilometers or something because it's hilly and they just keep going down. So all this also influences the way people play the game. Like obviously it's changing now a little bit because of the new methods and training. But these differences is what makes the Indian style so unique and different. Because like we can't play one style. We have to find a style that fits the team.
I love that idea though that the different places, the different histories, the different heritages of different states and different regions dictates how the game is actually played. I think that's a really fascinating insight.
That's what I'm doing for the second book.
Brilliant. I can't wait for that to come out. That's right up my street. Just before we finish up, Sandeep, I guess that kind of points to the final thing that I really wanted to ask was the kind of respect and the acknowledgement of football's history and heritage within India and how rich it actually is. Because, in my opinion, it doesn't get the respect that it deserves out with India, but I don't know if that's different within India with the Indian Super League. It's easy for perceptions to be thrown around and some things that aren't true to be told about these different things when people don't really understand them. So what's it like within India in terms of, I guess, acknowledging and promoting the history and heritage of football in the country and for different clubs as well?
There is a lack of it, I have to be honest. There is a lack of knowledge and there is a lack of promotion. But that is not, I don't know who you blame for that because the pockets where football is famous, everybody knows those stories. Like I grew up hearing stories about Kerala Police and Premier Ties. I watched a little bit of the Premier Ties as well. Titanium and all these teams that were a big part of Kerala's football history. But I don't know if that history is, not that I don't know. I don't think that history is relevant or as famous in other parts of the country. So similarly, it happens all in different pockets. And I don't think our All India Football Federation has done a good job to promote this diversity, to promote this history. They mostly focus on a few things and they rinse and repeat. Because I don't know if it's whether they're lazy to find new stories or what it may be. But they have not done a good job. The Indian Super League itself gets a lot of bad press because Indian national team's performance has dwindled in the last 2-3 years after the high of 2019, and a lot of people blame that on the ISL. I think that's harsh. I think ISL has done what it was. I mean, it's not their fault that the clubs are run the way they are run, or the association is run the way they are run, that the youth development structure in India is bad. All of these things are not the league's fault.
Yes.
But they do cop a lot of blame for things that they have done. And to be fair, they have done some stuff maybe that they shouldn't have done, or they could have done better. So there are pros and cons, but Indian football now is in probably the worst situation that I have seen. Because in 2013, 12, 13, around that time, Indian football was not that good, but that was a sort of apathy towards it from all quarters, from the media, from the association. They didn't play any games, all that. But now I can't complain about that. They are playing a lot more games. But the performance has really taken a hit. Our association is going through one problem after another, and court cases, and stories about controversies and allegations that is rattling them all over. So it's really a bad time. I honestly don't know how you get out of this. We got into this mess trying to get out of the previous mess. So it will take some really good administrators who are looking to develop the game even further with a long-term vision and things to come and change it. And I hope that does, because I know personally from my travels, for my research in the books and my knowledge of whatever the ecosystem and the people that I talk to, that there are a lot of people who are trying hard, who are trying in the right way. All they need is a little bit of support, a little bit of administrative organization, and a pathway. They can do it. One of the things that I keep telling whenever I do speak to somebody in the association or somebody, who can help or suggest to decision makers, is that you don't need the entire country to play football. We don't need it. We have so many people. We just need the parts of the country that are already interested in football to play football to the best of their levels. That's enough. And once they start performing for the national team, the interest overall will grow. All our ideas should not be, let's develop the Indian football as a whole. Maybe we should look at catering to the ones where the culture is strongest, and then use that as a drip feed to the rest of the country and develop it. Because football is played a lot. It's not like it's not. I mean, turf culture is huge here. A lot of us play football in our neighborhoods. A lot of people, the English Premier League and Champions League and World Cups, they're all huge. India's a huge market for all this. All you need is to figure out a way to get that interest onto Indian football and participation and structure around it. And so far we failed, but I hope that changes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's incredible, and I hope this insight has helped some of our listeners understand the context behind football in India a little bit better. I've learned so much myself, and this is one of the reasons that I was so keen on doing this recording, is because I wanted to learn a bit more. But, obviously we wanted to talk about the story of Bengaluru FC, their supporters, and what they've actually done for the city. But like you've mentioned there, Sandeep, there's so many other stories that are there to be told. It's just a case of going out to find them, promote them, and speak about them. And ultimately, that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I wanted to get out of this episode. And I'd like to think that's what we've done.
Yeah, I hope so too. I know I rambled a bit because I was sort of thinking off the top of my head. So for some instances there. But I hope I gave you an idea of what Indian football is like, because there are a lot of idiots like me who have spent their entire career trying to chronicle, and people, much older than me who have done great, great things. So we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? That's what they say. So there are many giants that we are standing on the shoulder of. So hopefully we can do enough that the next generation can stand on our shoulders as well.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And I think you're absolutely spot on. And I just can't wait for the next story from Indian football that we're going to be able to tell.
If anybody is interested in following Indian football, that would be great. Just as a general topic out there. I mean, you will not be bored. I'll tell you that much. I mean, the stuff that happens in Indian football is insane. It has everything, drama, people betraying each other, basically everything that you need to know from an administrative point of view. And then from the league itself, you'll have more than enough stories of players, of the clubs themselves, of regions doing great things. So it's an amazing environment.
It's an exciting league. It's an exciting type of football to watch, and it's a really interesting football culture to study.
You know Darryl Duffy, who played for Glasgow Rangers? He played in India for a while. We always assume that a foreigner comes in and he's so much better at football that they'll be able to walk the league and dominate everything. So I was chatting with him, he told me that's not the case, because he's like, in Scotland I make a run and the ball comes, so I can time it. In India I make the run and the ball doesn't come because the player hasn't seen me yet. So I have to not run because otherwise I'd stay outside. So I have to fight my instinct and then wait until the midfielder or whoever has put his head up and he made eye contact and then go. So these are changes that a foreign player has to adapt to India from a games environment standpoint. Plus the travel, I think nobody is prepared for that kind of travel. So a lot of them see a whole other world here.
I mean, to be fair, it's a lot to take in. There's all that thing about adapting to a new culture and things like that. But I do think a lot of players and a lot of people think that a lot of guys go over there to see out their careers and think it's going to be easy. They only end up lasting a year, if that. It's not an easy setting to try and adapt to.
No, it's not. The games are hard. The travel is hard. If you are in one of the more cosmopolitan cities, you'll get your favorite sort of food and whatever you needed to do. But if you are in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's hard. It's a whole other thing. So like you said, a lot of the players come here, stay for a year or two, and then leave because they can't continue. But the ones who stay on absolutely fall in love with the city, with the country, or with the club, with the city.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I can only encourage any of our listeners to go and check out Indian football a little bit more in depth. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll put the links to Sandeep's books and his other work in the show notes for this episode, so you can go and check out more of his work as well. But that's it for us this week. Thank you once again to all of our listeners who tuned in for this episode, and thank you once again to Sandeep for joining us. If there's anything that you want us to cover, or if you have any questions about this episode, you can get in touch with us via email. That's hello@footballheritage.co.uk, or you can also DM us on X or BlueSky. That's @_footyheritage. That's it from us this week. Sandeep, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.